Hey there, Patriots. Hope you're doing well. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about my thoughts on whether live service games are bad or not. Now, before I do begin, I just want to say that everything in this video is purely my opinion, and I won't be doing a full history breakdown of live service games. There are plenty of videos out there that do that way better than what I can do. And also, this video was inspired by Forrest Gaming's video called The Death of Live Service Games, which will be linked below in the description. It's a fantastic video, and I recommend you check it out as he does briefly go over the history of live service games and more. So, with that out of the way, let's talk about whether or not live service games are bad or not. Now, depending who you ask, you will probably get varying answers. Your new age Zoomer gamer might tell you that they enjoy live service games like Apex Legends, Fortnite, COD Warzone, and so on. Meanwhile, if you were to ask a old school traditional gamer, who I sort of am myself, you might get one saying, no, live service games are not good and they've only ruined the quality of games. And well, just as with most things in life, I think there is an in-between, and I don't think that all live service games are bad. Whether or not that's an answer you like or don't like, I will explain a little bit more. I think the current problem with a lot of live service games right now is that a lot of these game companies have little to no vision as to what the game they're trying to make is. And honestly, video games aren't the only ones suffering from this problem as well. A lot of movies and TV shows are also suffering from a lack of vision as well. Just look at any superhero movie beyond Endgame. A lot of movies and TV shows are going for this uniformity whenever it comes to their story writing, sets of characters, and even some of the settings these movies and shows end up with. And don't get me started on Jurassic World Dominion. JW3 was easily one of the most disconnected movies from the Jurassic Park franchise, but I digress. But for examples with games, like the Ghost Recon BR game that Ubisoft ended up canceling that I don't remember the name of, but I'm just going to call it Ghost Recon BR for this video. The problem with Ghost Recon BR and many other Ubisoft games as of late lack any vision and or innovation to the game they're trying to make. The game was basically a PUBG clone with the Ghost Recon graphic style to it. The problem that I see with the industry currently is the lack of vision. Now, I know it's pretty subjective to say a game lacks vision, and though you can't really define it, you can just kind of feel it, if that makes any sense. You ever play a game that just feels like it has no soul? You can't quite put your finger on it, but you can just feel it. The gameplay doesn't feel fun, the game looks the same as others before it, maybe the story just isn't there. All of these things just pile on that make you feel like this game just has no soul. That's how I feel a lot of these live service games are becoming nowadays. These companies make live service games because they just expect them to make money. They neglect the foundation required for making a game feel unique. The one lesson these companies for some reason have not learned yet is that video games are an art, and they must be treated as so in order for your consumer to want to involve themselves with this world that you spent so much money on to make. If that game lacks the purpose of trying to be virtual art that us, the consumer, controls, then we don't want to be part of this world you've tried to create. And whether that's a single player game or a multiplayer game, if it lacks that soul for us to want to engage with that game, then it's just going to be another game that fades away into the headlines of being another game that just got shut down. And even though games like COD Warzone can get away with being a generic FPS live service game, the thing is with COD is that it's one of those few games that can get away with it because of the game's legacy. Though I personally don't care about COD's gameplay loop anymore, tons of people still love the run and gun gameplay style that COD has mastered over its long decades of existence. Though I personally think COD lost its soul a long time ago, it's still, however, the only game that does its gameplay loop better than what most games can do. And whether you love or hate COD, that's just how it is. Though plenty of games have fallen into obscurity and ultimately failed, plenty of other games thrive because they are a live service game. Hell, you look at the Steam charts, a good portion of the most played games on there are live service games. And well, why is that? Well, it's as I was talking about before about games having a vision and a soul. Those games are so successful because they have a little bit of both. And even if you don't like the games on there like Destiny 2, Apex Legends, Fortnite, even though Fortnite's not on Steam, COD Warzone, the fact is when you look at these games, you can immediately tell what game is what. And even though some of these games may not have a story for you to experience, they make up for the lack of story vision with gameplay vision. These games are constantly coming out with new updates, new cosmetics for people to buy, new and experimental game modes, and so on. it keeps its player base coming back for more. And though I personally think it's a cheap way for these companies to run this FOMO style of marketing, ultimately replacing true grinding for just buying, but that's a whole different topic. A game that I do come back to from time to time that's only around today because it is a live service game is Sea of Thieves. If y'all remember the launch of that game, it was very bare bones with almost no PvE content to actually retain a player base attention. But now, however, the game has a thriving community, has a very active player base, and new content comes out for about every 6 months to a year. Another game that only survives because of it being a live service game is No Man's Sky, and I know that all of you remember the launch of that game. Now, you could debate whether or not Sean Murray was a scam artist, but the fact is that No Man's Sky is still playable to this day because they've been able to constantly release updates for that game that adds new and, might I add, free content. Say what you will about No Man's Sky and all the trouble that game went through, it's a better game now because of the live service model. And for all you gamers of old, that never could have happened almost 20 years ago. If that game would have came out 20 something years ago, it would have been dead and done. However, though, don't confuse the fact that I've said all this stuff about those games as me saying that live service games are good. Because while yes, games being able to freely update their game on the fly to fix or add anything is a good thing, it's also made them lazy too. But as I said earlier in this video, there is an in-between of the good and the bad of live service games. These games I previously mentioned work because they were designed that way, and whether you think they're good or bad, they're uninnovative, that's perfectly okay to discuss, and I'm sure there's a lot of points there that I would probably agree to. But just as those games succeed, others fail, like Halo Infinite for example. Halo Infinite is a perfect example of a game that not only lacked a vision from an artistic standpoint, but from a gameplay and a story perspective as well. Halo was never meant to be treated as a live service game. Halo's identity has always been based around the community. Things like Forge, custom games, split screen co-op and multiplayer. The game was never envisioned to be a game where you buy cosmetics and grind a battle pass. The live service model killed Halo's identity, and sadly, I don't think it will ever recover. But to wrap things up, here are some final thoughts about what I have to say about everything as I've talked about in this video. As I said before, the live service model itself isn't a bad thing. In fact, I'd argue that it's the very reason why our favorite multiplayer games are still around for us to play, like the games I mentioned that are around today because of the ability to update and add content to a game on the fly. However, a game needs to have a vision for it to succeed. It needs to be treated like an art, and when it's not, when it's just another money printing copy of a game that already exists and does it better than what you're trying to do, it's not going to work and you're only going to hurt the game industry even more than what it's already hurting already. Also, I do not think single player games should be treated as live service games. The new Suicide Squad game I think will flop because it is being treated as a live service game. The only thing I think you should really have to pay for in a single player game are expansion packs that add more content to an already finished game, but I'm sure that's an opinion that most of you would probably agree to. Game developers like Ubisoft and others like them are killing their own games by removing any form of in-game grinding that you can do to unlock new things for your character. When you add microtransactions to a single-player game, you are going backwards by not rewarding your player by playing your game. I also don't think every multiplayer game needs to have constant events that happen every 3 months, add new cosmetics for you to buy, and require you to buy battle passes in order for you to earn cosmetics without outright buying them. There's always an in-between, and it really depends on the type of game you are trying to make. I would love to see more creative takes in both the multiplayer and single player section of gaming, because while not all live service games are bad, they are very oversaturated in the gaming market, and we are in dire need of new vision. And though indie games are leading the gaming industry in creativity, the unfortunate thing about a lot of these projects, though, is that they really can't go far due to funding and employee resources. I really hope in the future we see more and more creativity in both single player and multiplayer games from bigger studios that just don't try to make live service PR games or terrible unfinished cash grabs. Anyway, that's going to be it for this video. For those of you who watched this video entirely, I greatly appreciate your time, and any thoughts you have about what I had to say, whether you agree, disagree, let me know in the comments down below. I love to hear what you guys have to say. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy the content, and I will see you when the next video drops.